The night air was unusually still at the military compound, the kind of stillness that made every sound seem louder than it actually was. The tomb of the decorated war hero stood solemnly under soft lights, a place of respect and quiet reverence. It was one of the most secure sites in the country, protected not just by the ceremonial guards who stood silently by day and night, but also by SWAT officers and security personnel trained to react to any unusual threat. That evening, Officer Ryan Parker, a SWAT officer with years of experience in high-pressure situations, was on duty. He had served on countless security assignments before, some routine, some requiring split-second decisions that could make the difference between safety and disaster. But nothing had prepared him for what was about to happen that night. The officer's eyes scanned the perimeter, noting the faint movement in the shadows near the tomb. The figure appeared small and agile, moving closer with surprising speed. Officer Parker's heart rate increased. His training kicked in automatically: assess, react, protect. He had learned over the years that hesitation in situations like this could have serious consequences. "Who's there?" he called out, his voice steady but firm. There was no response. The figure continued to move closer, partially obscured by the dim lighting. Parker's mind raced. He had no way of knowing whether this was a threat or just someone performing a legitimate duty. But in those first few seconds, uncertainty could cost lives. Without thinking twice, he reached for his taser. The device was standard issue, a non-lethal tool designed to stop potential threats quickly and safely. Officer Parker knew the consequences of using it. But in that moment, the figure's movements seemed deliberate and fast, and his instincts told him action was necessary. He fired the taser. The electric charge hit the figure, who immediately collapsed, the sound of a thud echoing through the otherwise silent grounds. Officer Parker stepped forward cautiously, eyes still scanning the area for any additional threat. His training had taught him to expect the unexpected, to never assume safety until the scene was fully secured. As he approached, he realized the figure on the ground wasn't an intruder at all. It was one of the ceremonial tomb guards, a young soldier named Daniel Matthews who had been performing his nightly watch duties. Matthews' role was to maintain the dignity of the site, standing vigilant and moving in precise practice steps during his shift. He had done this countless times without incident, and Officer Parker's sudden intervention had caught him completely off guard. The guard's uniform was slightly disheveled, and his eyes were wide with shock. "Sir, I was just on duty," he stammered, trying to rise. The taser's effect was fading, but the moment had already left a mark, an awkward, tense energy that hung heavily in the night air. Officer Parker helped him to his feet, his mind racing with a mix of relief and concern. Nearby, other officers had gathered, drawn by the sudden noise and movement. Whispers passed through the group like a ripple in water. Some looked at Parker with questioning eyes, others glanced at Matthews, unsure of what had just happened. The situation, simple a minute before, had transformed into a scene filled with uncertainty, curiosity, and silent tension. The military compound had strict protocols for these kinds of incidents. Even though Parker had acted based on what he believed was an immediate threat, every action taken on the grounds would be reviewed thoroughly. He knew that. He also knew that at that moment, his focus had been entirely on protection and response. Training and instinct had taken over, guiding him to act before analyzing every possibility. Matthews, meanwhile, was regaining his composure. Though he was shaken, he tried to reassure both himself and the other officers around him. He straightened his uniform, adjusted his cap, and took a steadying breath. This was his responsibility, his duty, and no accidental encounter could diminish the pride he felt in serving in such a revered role. Still, a quiet tension lingered. Being tased even unintentionally was not something one could easily forget. The silence returned, heavier now than before, as everyone waited for what would come next. Officer Parker glanced at Matthews, then back at the surrounding officers. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him, the awareness that every action was being observed, every decision noted. In security work, mistakes were rare, but when they happened, they were always magnified. As Parker collected his thoughts, he reviewed the situation in his mind. He remembered the shadowy movement, the feeling of uncertainty, the split-second decision to use his taser. He knew it had been the right call given the circumstances, but he also knew that there would be questions, investigations, and explanations to follow. Moments like these tested not only skill and training but character and judgment. Meanwhile, Matthews, once fully conscious and steady, began to explain his side. He described his nightly routine, the precise steps he took to honor the tomb, and the silent vigilance that defined his duty. The other officers listened, gaining a clearer understanding of the situation. What had seemed like a sudden attack was in reality a collision of two roles, one defined by reaction to threat, the other defined by ceremonial responsibility. Despite the initial tension, a sense of mutual respect began to emerge. Officer Parker recognized Matthews' dedication, understanding the commitment required to serve as a tomb guard. Matthews, in turn, appreciated the readiness and courage it took to respond to perceived danger. Both roles, though different, shared the same ultimate goal: protection and respect for the country and its heroes. The incident, while brief, left a lasting impression on everyone present. It highlighted the unpredictability of security work, the necessity of training, and the human element that underlies every decision made under pressure. What had begun as a potential crisis evolved into a story of professionalism, respect, and the careful balance between vigilance and understanding. As the night continued, both Parker and Matthews resumed their respective duties. The grounds were secure once again, the lights casting long, calm shadows over the tomb. The incident became a silent lesson, a reminder that even the most routine nights could bring unexpected challenges, and that courage, quick thinking, and respect were always intertwined. Though no one spoke loudly about it, the memory of the taser, the sudden shock, and the split-second decision would remain with both men. They knew that in the world of security, vigilance must always meet judgment, and that every role, whether ceremonial or tactical, played a vital part in the protection of something far greater than themselves. By the time the first hints of dawn touched the horizon, the night's tension had settled into quiet reflection. Officer Parker, tired but alert, made his rounds, scanning the area with renewed awareness. Matthews, standing tall by the tomb, returned to his ceremonial duties, each step a tribute to the heroes who came before him. In that small, quiet moment, the complex dance of duty, honor, and responsibility had unfolded, and the story of that unusual night was only just beginning. The night had barely settled into quiet again, when the distant rumble of a vehicle engine broke the calm. Officer Ryan Parker, still processing the earlier incident with the tomb guard, instinctively turned toward the sound. Something about the timing felt unusual. The compound was secure, all entry points monitored, and no vehicles were scheduled to arrive at this hour. As the headlights approached, the guards and officers nearby instinctively straightened, their attention sharpening. The vehicle slowed at the main gate, and in a matter of seconds it became clear this was no ordinary arrival. The presence emanating from the car carried weight, authority, and purpose. A four-star general had come to inspect the site personally. His name alone commanded respect, and his sudden appearance intensified the already charged atmosphere. Officer Parker felt a ripple of tension run through him. He had been trained for high-pressure scenarios, but this was different. He had acted swiftly moments earlier, using a taser on what he believed was a potential threat, and now, the highest-ranking officer on the base was walking toward the very scene where that incident had occurred. His mind raced with a mixture of apprehension and anticipation. The general stepped out of the vehicle with the quiet authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. His uniform was impeccable, every insignia polished, every medal perfectly aligned. He moved with a steady confidence that demanded attention without a word. Officers snapped to attention as he approached, his eyes scanning the area like a hawk, taking in every detail, the shadows, the positions of personnel, and the faint evidence of the recent commotion. Parker swallowed hard, feeling the weight of scrutiny settle on him. The general's gaze fell first on the tomb guard, Daniel Matthews, who was trying to regain his composure after the earlier shock. Matthews stood rigid yet calm, as if the world itself had not shifted beneath him. The general nodded slightly, a subtle acknowledgement of Matthews's dedication and discipline. Then, slowly, the general turned his gaze toward Parker. There was no anger in his eyes, but there was something heavier: expectation. Every officer nearby felt it, a kind of invisible pressure that made the night air feel even denser. Parker's mind replayed the moments that had just passed. The shadowy figure, the split-second decision, the taser deployed without hesitation. He had acted according to his training, but now, he had to account for every detail under the watchful eyes of a man whose authority could change careers with a single word. "Officer Parker," the general began, his voice calm but commanding. "Explain what happened here." The words were simple, yet the weight behind them made Parker realize that this was no ordinary debriefing. This was a test, not of skill alone, but of judgment, integrity, and the ability to respond under pressure. Parker straightened, taking a deep breath to steady his nerves. He recounted the events as clearly and honestly as possible. He described the shadowy figure near the tomb, the immediate concern for safety, the split-second decision to use the taser, and the realization that the figure was a ceremonial guard. Every detail was laid out without exaggeration or omission, every action justified by protocol and instinct. The general listened silently, his expression unreadable. He moved slowly among the group of officers, inspecting the area, noting the positions and asking brief, pointed questions about training, readiness, and observation. Each question was designed to test not just Parker, but the entire security team. How well did they know the site? How alert were they? How quickly could they distinguish between threat and duty? Meanwhile, Matthews remained composed, though a subtle tension ran through his movements. He too was aware of the general's presence, the weight of authority in the air, and the delicate balance between respect for ceremony and the reality of security. He adjusted his stance slightly, making sure every line of his uniform was straight, every gesture measured. The general's attention to detail was legendary, and Matthews knew that even the smallest misstep could attract notice. The officers around them exchanged quiet glances. Some had witnessed the taser incident and felt a mix of empathy and nervousness on Parker's behalf. Others, who had not been directly involved, watched intently, trying to learn from the unfolding lesson. There was a sense that something important was happening, a moment that would be remembered long after the night ended. The general finally spoke again, addressing the group. "This compound is not just a place of duty. It is a symbol of our values, our history, and our responsibility. Every action here reflects on each of you and by extension on the service we uphold. Vigilance is essential, but understanding the situation is equally critical. Decisions made in haste can have consequences, even when the intention is to protect." His words were measured, but they carried the weight of years of experience. Officer Parker felt a mix of relief and continued apprehension. Relief that the general had not reacted with immediate reprimand, and apprehension because the expectations had just become clearer, sharper, more exacting. Every future action, he realized, would be measured against this night's events. The general then turned his focus back to Matthews. "And you," he said, "your role here is symbolic yet vital. You honor the history of our service, and your presence reminds everyone of what we protect. Discipline, consistency, and awareness are your tools, just as they are for those tasked with security. Both paths serve the same purpose in different ways." Matthews nodded respectfully, understanding the nuance in the general's words. This was not criticism nor praise alone, it was a lesson. It was a reminder that duty came in many forms, and that respect for one another's responsibilities strengthened the mission. For a moment, the night seemed to hold its breath. The officers, Parker included, realized that the situation could have ended very differently. But it had ended with lessons learned, with understanding, and with the presence of authority that reinforced the chain of command and the values it upheld. As the general concluded his inspection, he moved to shake hands with both Parker and Matthews, a gesture of acknowledgement rather than punishment. "You both did what you thought was right," he said. "Remember, judgment and action must go hand in hand. Learn from this, and let it guide your future decisions." The impact of his words settled in slowly. Parker realized that the night's events were a reminder of the fragile line between security and ceremony, between rapid response and careful assessment. Matthews felt a renewed sense of purpose, recognizing that his ceremonial role was part of a larger mission, one that required understanding not just of tradition, but of the people around him. As the general departed, the officers returned to their posts, but the energy of the night lingered. The compound felt different now, not less secure but more aware, more connected. Every movement, every glance, every step would carry the memory of the night when split-second decisions, ceremonial duty, and the presence of the highest authority had intersected in a single, unforgettable moment. Officer Parker stood quietly, reflecting on the lessons of the night. He understood now more clearly than ever that being prepared was more than training. It was about awareness, judgment, and respect for the many roles that keep the country safe. Matthews resumed his position by the tomb, his movements precise, each step a silent tribute to history and honor. In the quiet aftermath, the officers spoke softly among themselves, sharing observations and insights. The Taser incident, while startling, had become more than a mistake. It was a story of learning, growth, and the complexity of responsibility. It reminded everyone present that vigilance must always be paired with understanding, that authority carries lessons as much as commands, and that even brief, unexpected moments could shape careers, perspectives, and the culture of duty. The night finally began to give way to the first hints of dawn. A new day was approaching, yet the lessons from the night remained vivid. Officer Parker, Matthews, and the rest of the team had faced an unusual situation, one that tested their skills, patience, and character. And as they moved forward, the memory of the general's presence, his words, and the unusual sequence of events would guide their decisions, their vigilance, and their dedication to the values they served. Though the commotion had lasted only a few minutes, the impact would be felt for much longer. The night had been a reminder that in security, in duty, and in life, moments of tension could arrive unexpectedly. Authority could appear without warning, and the way one responded could define both personal and professional character. The compound returned to its quiet, solemn rhythm. The lights cast long shadows, the tomb stood undisturbed, and the officers resumed their vigilance. More aware, more cautious, and more appreciative of the delicate balance between duty and understanding. The story of that night, the Taser, and the arrival of the four-star general would be remembered, not as a tale of failure, but as a story of learning, reflection, and the enduring principles of service. The morning sun began to stretch its pale light across the compound, casting long, calm shadows over the tomb and the surrounding grounds. The night's unusual events were still fresh in everyone's minds, and the energy of the previous hours lingered like a quiet hum in the air. Officer Ryan Parker walked slowly along the perimeter, checking his equipment, reviewing his notes, and reflecting on the lessons of the night. Even though the immediate tension had passed, Parker felt a responsibility that went beyond the physical tasks of his role. That brief encounter with the tomb guard and the sudden arrival of the four-star general had left a lasting impression. He understood now more clearly than ever that security was not just about responding to threats. It was about judgment, awareness, and understanding the broader picture of duty. Daniel Matthews, the tomb guard, was already at his post, standing tall and composed as he resumed his ceremonial duties. The events of the night had been unsettling, but Matthews had handled the situation with grace. He moved deliberately, each step measured, each gesture precise. To the casual observer, it might have seemed like nothing had changed. But Matthews knew that he had learned something new about the intersection of ceremonial responsibility and security, and about the unpredictable nature of human actions. As the day progressed, officers began to gather for a formal debriefing. The compound's leadership, including Parker's direct supervisors, convened in the briefing room to discuss the night's events, evaluate responses, and ensure that lessons were documented for future training. The atmosphere was serious yet constructive. Mistakes were addressed not with harshness, but with the goal of improvement, emphasizing accountability, awareness, and collaboration. Parker sat quietly, recounting the moments that had led to the Taser incident. He explained his thought process, describing the perceived threat, the split-second decision, and the realization that Matthews was performing his legitimate duty. Every detail mattered, not just to explain what had happened, but to provide insight into the pressures and responsibilities faced by officers in high-stakes situations. Matthews also shared his perspective, explaining the routines and responsibilities of his ceremonial role. He highlighted the importance of vigilance, discipline, and precision, not only to maintain the dignity of the tomb, but also to ensure safety and security. His explanation helped the other officers understand the unique challenges faced by ceremonial guards, and the ways in which their responsibilities intersected with those of the tactical teams. The discussion emphasized communication and situational awareness. Officers reviewed the layout of the compound, the movement patterns of personnel, and the ways in which visual and environmental cues could prevent misunderstandings. The incident, while brief, had become a case study in the importance of coordination, respect, and clarity in decision-making. Outside the briefing room, the compound resumed its usual rhythm. Officers conducted their rounds with renewed attention, watching not only for potential threats, but also for the nuances of daily activity that could indicate unusual events. Parker and Matthews exchanged a quiet nod as they passed one another, a silent acknowledgement of the lessons they had learned, and the mutual respect that had grown between them. The story of the Taser incident and the general's visit began to circulate subtly among the personnel. It was not gossip, but a learning opportunity. Officers spoke quietly about judgment under pressure, about the importance of understanding the roles of others, and about the weight of authority and responsibility. The narrative became part of the culture of the compound, a reminder that even small moments could carry significant consequences and valuable lessons. Later that afternoon, Parker found a quiet moment to review his own actions in private. He thought about the rapid decision-making, the instincts that had guided him, and the clarity he had gained from the general's presence and feedback. He realized that the night had tested not only his professional skills, but also his ability to remain calm, reflective and adaptable in unpredictable circumstances. Matthews, too, reflected on the night's events. While he had always taken pride in his ceremonial role, the incident had highlighted the importance of understanding the broader context in which his duties existed. He recognized that his presence was not just symbolic, it played a tangible role in security, discipline, and morale. The Taser incident, while unintentional, had reinforced the interconnectedness of all roles within the compound. As the day progressed, the general's visit and words became part of training discussions for all personnel. Officers examined scenarios in which judgment and quick response had to be balanced, exploring ways to maintain vigilance without escalating minor incidents unnecessarily. The focus was on learning, growth, and strengthening the effectiveness of the team. Throughout the day, the compound felt different. There was a renewed sense of awareness and connection among the officers and guards. Parker and Matthews, though continuing their separate duties, shared a sense of mutual understanding. They had experienced firsthand how unpredictable moments could test training, character, and judgment, and how authority, when exercised with clarity and fairness, could transform tension into insight. In quiet moments between rounds, Parker thought about the human element of his work. Technology, training, and protocols were essential, but ultimately, the decisions made by individuals, how they interpreted situations, how they responded under pressure, and how they communicated, defined the success of any operation. The night's events had reinforced this truth vividly. Matthews considered the ceremonial aspects of his role with renewed pride. Each movement, each gesture, each watchful glance now carried a deeper significance. He understood that maintaining the dignity of the tomb was part of a larger mission, to honor history, uphold standards, and contribute to the security and morale of the compound. The Taser incident, though accidental, had emphasized the responsibility inherent in every action, no matter how routine it seemed. By evening, the compound had returned to its normal rhythm. Officers were alert but calm, and the tomb stood undisturbed, bathed in the soft glow of security lights. The events of the previous night were still fresh in memory, but they had become part of the narrative of the compound, an example of vigilance, responsibility, and the lessons that come from unexpected moments. Parker and Matthews shared a quiet conversation near the tomb, reflecting on what they had learned. "It was a strange night," Parker admitted, "but I think we both understand things a little differently now. I see how important your role is, and I realize how quickly things can escalate if we're not careful." Matthews nodded. "And I see how important it is to be aware of the bigger picture. My duty doesn't stop at tradition, it's connected to yours and everyone else's here. We all have a part to play." Their conversation captured the essence of the night's lessons, that respect, awareness, and understanding were just as important as vigilance and training. The incident had not just been a moment of tension, It had become a story of growth, learning, and mutual respect between individuals serving a shared purpose. As night fell once again, the compound was quiet, but the sense of preparedness and awareness was stronger than ever. Officers moved with purpose, ceremonial guards performed their duties with precision, and the lessons of the night remained quietly influential. The taser incident and the general's visit had left a mark, not one of fear but one of reflection, improvement, and dedication to duty. The story concluded with a quiet acknowledgement of the interconnectedness of all roles within the compound. Parker returned to his post with renewed focus, Matthews continued his ceremonial duties with deeper understanding, and the officers around them carried forward the lessons learned. The events of that unusual night would be remembered not as a mistake or a failure, but as a demonstration of courage, judgment, and the enduring principles of service. In the days that followed, both Parker and Matthews noticed subtle changes in how the team operated. Communication was clearer, awareness was sharper, and respect for each other's roles was more pronounced. The night had been a test, but it had also strengthened the team, reinforced protocols, and reminded everyone that vigilance and understanding must always go hand in hand. The tomb remained a symbol of honor and history, but it had also become a symbol of learning and resilience. Every officer and guard who walked its grounds now carried a deeper appreciation for the delicate balance between duty, judgment, and respect. And in that quiet, steadfast vigilance, the spirit of the night's lessons endured,